So men feeling is it's an important topic that I get asked about a lot. I'm not really a big fan of men exercising that muscle too much because when we exercise that muscle too much, it's like a muscle. So the more you exercise feeling and honoring your feelings all the time as a man, the more felt based you become. This is going to make your nervous system erratic. It's going to make your nervous system unstable, and it's going to make you chaotic. You don't want this as a man. You want to be able to develop a approach of resiliency. I like the term stoic resilience because there's a lot of good philosophy in stoicism. And what we want as men is to be dependable and reliable in the face of adversity and not fold. And if you're overly feeling, you will fold. You know, I also say not to take most of your stuff to your woman. Now, in our modern society, and I've had this many times online, a woman has said that they want a man that feels so deeply and that is emotional and vulnerable. And I'm like, okay, well, you want a girlfriend. And that's not a healthy outcome for a man to be like that. And despite what women say, it's because they want this because the nature of what a healthy man is few and far between these days. I can promise you this. I can promise you this. A woman feels safe with a man that's overly emotional because it's more like her, because the demonstration of real masculinity these days has gone so far out the window that a real man that shows up is either going to terrify a woman or she won't be attracted to him. That's actually the second part's probably a little bit inaccurate. She'll be attracted to him, but she won't know why or how to handle it because we have a society which has largely taken on the role of mother for men, and the mummy's boy is everywhere these days. And in my opinion, one of the most unattractive things is when a man honors his mother over his woman. And I don't think that that should be a part of a relationship. If you're with a woman, she should be your number one, not your mother. I don't know where this became like this point of honoring where it's like, oh, I love my mother and she's my number one. I heard Terence Crawford, actually, he was on Joe Rogan the other day. He's kind of been labeled as the GOAT now, boxer. He called his mother his girl. He's like, that's my girl. It's like, whoa, that's creepy and it's fucking unhealthy. And I don't believe in that at all. You don't call your mum your girl. And, you know, it is what it is with it. But there are these overly tight bonds to the mother because there are a lot of single mothers these days that are raising children, and an absence of what real men look like. I also saw a comment the other day with a woman that said, if a man is not a feminist, he's a toddler. And the kind of gaslighting and ridiculousness of that statement is like, I could do a whole video on that, but I won't. So this is about feeling. The first thing is feelings are not facts. Don't be ruled by your feelings. Cooler heads prevail. Give them some space. If you go back in your history, right, feelings and decisions are going to manifest in two ways. There's incorrect decisions and there's bad decisions. Incorrect decisions come without the weight of an emotional debt that you pay on them. So like regret, resentment, guilt, or shame. So this is something we learn from. It's like business or, you know, athletics or whatever. It's just a mistake. There's no emotional component to it. Bad decisions, on the other hand, these things are taken with a outcome that we regret or resent another person or guilt or shame, whatever, anger perhaps as well. But these things are all, these decisions, bad decisions are always 100% of the time going to be made when you trust your gut. In other words, trust your feelings about it. Every bad decision that you've made will be from an overwhelmingly emotional state. This is why it's important to not always honor your feelings. Okay, this is super important. Like what you want as a man is to be able to face adversity and remain calm in the face of adversity. This is kind of stoic resilience, whatever. You can make whatever synonym you want around it or metaphorical statement. It doesn't really matter. The whole idea that we've got to be vulnerable all the time to our women, don't take everything to your woman. Maybe 5%. Handle it with brothers. Get brothers around you. You have to have brothers around you, and not ones that are, like chasing women all the time and doing drugs and going out and getting into trouble and all that sort of shit. Those are not the right brothers. For my inner circle, I don't associate a lot with men that are obsessed with sex, because they will betray you. They will ditch you for a woman, right? There's the saying bros before hoes, which I don't really like, but they'll betray men. I've had men do that to boys do that to me, that would try to like sleep with, with an ex-partner or something like that at the time. And they're like, oh man, it's just sex. And it's like, no, you don't do that. And so in my inner circle that I'd work with and do business with and collaborate with, if they're obsessed with sex or chasing women because they're pleasure driven, so they're feeling driven, they've got no discipline over it, I won't do business with that person. And I wouldn't really let them too close either. I wouldn't go into that world either with them, because I'm not for that. I don't stand for that. So you've got to be cautious of these men that can't control that. It's a very powerful force. And if they're overly feeling driven, they're not going to have control over that, which means they're not going to have control over a lot of their emotions. And when you get a man that is fully driven by his emotions, you get one that is unstable, that is controlling, that is needy, that is domineering, that is tyrannical, that throws his toys out of the pram, all of this kind of stuff. And that's what you don't want. I'm telling you as a man, that's not what you want. Men tell men how to be men, no one else. But men that have done the things that you want to do. I had a good interaction with a client of mine yesterday, and he was in a state, and he was like, I'm fucking weak, I'm pathetic, I'm this, I'm that, all of it. And I'm like, good. This is what vulnerability is. You take it to your bros. I corrected him on it and course corrected around where he was. And what was happening is what was coming up it was very close to a breakthrough. He's very close to a breakthrough to transcend that, because he grew up with, an unstable emotional man as a father, and the rest were women. Okay, so this is what happens with a boy. I get asked all the time online, how do I make sure as a single mum that I don't raise a boy that's weak or chaotic or abuses the feminine? Get him around good men. Send him to martial arts. And if you take him to martial arts, leave and don't watch the class. This is one where you need to leave him alone. Cut the apron strings before he has to later on. Go there and say, all right, I'm leaving, and let his sensei or his professor or whatever look after him, and he will start to learn resiliency. This is important. I mean, if he's 5 or 6 or 4, sure, there's a bit of allowance that, but once he gets to 8, 9, let him go. You got to let him go. So when we're talking about like feeling and the nature of vulnerability, this also manifests in two arms. There's vulnerability in danger, that equals trauma. So this is where we see an abusive relationship will be formed under this. Vulnerable, and I've been in abusive relationships before, where you stop becoming open because it's just like, well, what's the point? You're just going to gaslight me, be dismissive, deny my experience. Be very careful where you take your vulnerability to. So there's vulnerability plus danger equals trauma. Vulnerability plus safety equals healing. It's a very powerful formula. And so what happens is vulnerability is also kind of synonymous with humility, right? But vulnerability is more around willingness to be exposed, whereas humility has transcended that and you own the exposure. So vulnerability is the step to exposure, like opening up. Whereas humility is I'm fully owning it. So then there's nothing to be exposed. So there's the minute you're okay being vulnerable, you're no longer vulnerable, right? Because you just own it. And then you don't really get overly emotional because of it. So as a man, you want capacity. Your nervous system has to be able to handle capacity. And so capacity is a big one that I talk about a lot, is you want to be able to handle large amounts of emotions while remaining unfazed. So you can get the heat firing up in your body and you can be like, I'm not going to be reactive right now. It's just a feeling and I allow it to pass. Then you start to become sober as opposed to intoxicated, right? You do not want to be making decisions from an intoxicated space, whether overly excited, overly in love, overly intense, overly sexual, or overly angry, overly sad, overly fearful or overly guilty or anything like that. You don't want to make decisions when you're in those states because you're intoxicated. Then you're under the influence of a chemical substance in the form of either adrenaline or dopamine or serotonin or cortisol or adrenaline, whatever it is. That's a chemical addiction. It's the same as doing drugs. And so if you're making decisions from that place, wait, put space in between it. And the more you can practice this, the better you'll get at actually handling your feelings, and the more reliable you'll become, the more stable you'll become, the more present you'll become. The reason why we try to fix women is because we feel like if we don't, then we get scared. Like a fear will come up, like, oh my God, I've got to do something. If you want my advice on that, hold your woman when she's upset. Just give her a hug. It's pretty simple. Ask her, say, do you mind if I hold you right now while you're upset? You don't need to fix it. You don't need to change it, because in those moments, she's asking to be held. An overly emotional man will go, I'm being triggered and now I need you to hold space for me. There's nothing more unattractive than a man that needs his woman to hold space for him, especially if he's had just a bad day or if something's going on or he's been bullied on the work site or something like that. Men have become soft. And me and my mates, we shred each other through banter. We support each other too, and we have very deep philosophical conversations. We spend hours laughing together when we are together. And there's me and a couple of my closest bros, nothing slips through the cracks. Nothing slips through the cracks. And that one small thing can turn into half an hour of laughing and humor and hilarity. That's just, it's awesome. And you walk away feeling good. But then there's serious chats, there's philosophical chats, there's confrontations, there's all of it. And this is the dynamic that plays out because there's openness, honesty, and willingness to approach that. It's also met with banter, and banter is sort of like hierarchical checking at some level. It is. How well can you take a joke? I got a good mate. He even says to me, his joke to me is, you can't take a joke. And he gets me on it because it's like, oh yeah, cool. All right, no worries. But if I were to operate on my feelings in that space, I wouldn't last very long because I'd be getting offended and upset and sad and all of that stuff. And so resiliency is what you develop by being around the right men. And this is a very important aspect for us to understand. Do not listen to the public narrative around what it means to be a man and that you need to become overly feeling. And I'll share this. 85% of new therapists are female. The whole sit and talk therapy is the way that women process words, feelings, senses, and emotions. They bring all that together. They can do that by talking because they can access two parts of the brain, whereas men only access one. So words and feelings and memories, they get processed through movement together. This is why grappling is and literally grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, anything where there's male contact sport, we need roughhousing. Men need roughhousing. It's part of the way that our brain develops. We need to fight. We need to wrestle. We need that camaraderie with other men. That's why, going to war shoulder to shoulder, you create bonds. And I haven't been to war. But from the research that I've looked at, that's why we have such powerful bonds with the men we go to war with. People will die for you side to side. That's what men do. You need men to walk next to in life that are good, that are solid, that are doing good things in the world, that care about you, that will say, right, Thingo's in a state, Thingo, your mate or your bro is in a state, we got to get him out of it and we've got to help him through it, right? I do this, and I'm one of those people because I've designed myself that way. And you have to have experiences that you've overcome, right? There has been times where I've acted on feeling and I regret it. There's times where I've said things that I regret afterwards because I've been emotional. The times that I feel the best and where I feel the most accomplished is when there's an intense space in front of me and I handle it and I work on it and I manage it in a way that doesn't hurt anyone, that doesn't spill out onto others. And this is why it's important. And it's important to regulate your nervous system. You can do different types of breath work, breathing, grounding. Get around men that are stronger than you, that are better than you in certain areas, that will also honor your strengths as well. Understand your somatic relationship to your body. It's just feelings. That's all it is. And find purpose and do some hard things. These are the way we become an integrated man. It's not by honoring some feminine attribute of yours that has been dumped on us, that somehow the only way we can become masculine is to become feminine. It's fucking bullshit. It's a lie. Become good at being a man, transcend your boy psychology, and then if you want to go and explore your feminine, go and do it. But I can tell you from history that I've seen, the stuff I've worked through, and the other men that I know, the only feminine you're going to want to integrate with is when you transcend your boy psychology is to get married. That's about it. You know, your feminine principle will become your wife or your woman. You know, it's not going to be something that you need to dredge up or excavate within yourself to gaslight yourself to think that you're not man enough because you're not putting your head in your woman's lap and crying your little heart out. It's not it. I can tell you that.